Hello, good morning, and welcome to Eurostat's webinar series. My name is Mark O'Sullivan, and I'm an Information and Communication Officer at Eurostat, and your moderator for today's webinar. Housing remains a hot topic across the EU, but it exists across many different statistical domains, such as macroeconomic statistics, population and living conditions, business statistics, and energy and the environment. Today I'm joined by two of our in-house experts, who are trying to bring all of this information together in one place. They're going to take us on a short tour of housing statistics, and they're going to do this by starting to show us how to navigate Eurostat's housing statistics, before then taking us on a deeper dive into housing data. And during these presentations, if anything isn't clear, or you'd like to send a question to either of our speakers, you can do so via slido.com with the code hashtag 3579246. And the link should also be available on this page. So, let's begin. I'd like to offer a warm welcome to our first speaker, Sigida Geske. Sigida is the Head of Unit of Income and Living Conditions and Quality of Life, and today we'll present on navigating Eurostat's website on housing statistics. Sigida, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning. My name is Sigita Geske, and I am Head of Unit of Income and Living Conditions in Eurostat. This is a unit which is dealing with statistical surveys. Today, I have pleasure to tell you how to find statistics on housing in Eurostat webpage and also associated information with these statistics. When we think about housing, there are many aspects which could possibly come to our mind. Is this apartment or a house? Is it for sale or for rent? What about the quality of the apartment or the house? Is it sustainable? Can I reach easy my place of employment or education place? And most importantly, is it affordable for me? So this and all other information, it is very important, and Eurostat provides you information regarding these multidimensional aspects of the housing. In total, we have more than 40 data sources which provides information on the housing. We have classified them into 5 major topics, which is macroeconomic statistics, social statistics, business statistics, energy environment statistics, and also we have a richer geospatial database. When we think about housing, so we can distinguish elements which could determine the housing demand and housing supply, as well as housing prices, price indexes, and affordability. So all these aspects are also available in our database. Recently, to help the users and to streamline housing statistics, we have created at Eurostat special page website where we provide information, all necessary elements regarding the housing statistics. There we have an overview page, we have direct access to database, we have direct access to visualizations, publications, information on data and methodology, as well as quality aspects of different statistics related to the housing. Also, you can have a full list of legal acts which are serving as legal basis to collect information on the housing. I think one of the most important and interesting parts is actually the data on the housing. When we push this button, we can have direct access, first of all, to the Eurostat online database, where there is a special tab called Housing, but as well we have access to Census Hub, Population Census Grid, Census Dwelling Grid. What we can find in Eurostat online database, that currently more than 200 indicators are listed, according to 5 major topics: economy and finance, population and social conditions, industry, trade and services, environment and energy. So all these subtopics has multiple indicators, and we encourage you to explore this information and use for your information or other purposes like research or other interests. When we go back to the web page, we have information regarding Census Hub Advanced, where we can make advanced queries on dwellings and demographic characteristics. Population census grid provide information on data available at 1 square kilometer grids. And we also have census dwelling grid data, where the total number of conventional dwellings in Europe are recorded in 2021 census at spatial resolution of 1 square kilometer. Next, I would like to introduce to the recent publication by Eurostat, Housing in Europe. It is annual publication and 2025 edition was released on 27th November. It features the sections How We Live, about the housing cost construction. It has many interactive charts, graphs, and maps. We are very encouraging you to look at this publication and discover yourself this information. Regarding the data content, first time we have a data on discrimination in the housing published by Eurostat and included in this publication. There we can find information about share of people feeling discriminated when looking for housing, and this is based on 2024 data. We can also see in this graph differences between people who are at risk of poverty, total population, and people who are not at risk of poverty, which actually produce a big difference. But further on data, I would like to give floor to Domingo. Thank you.
Thanks, Sigita. That was great. And now moving on, I'm happy to introduce Jose Domingo Martinez Solano, the Deputy Head of Unit of Population and Migration Statistics, who will present us a deep dive into housing data. Domingo, the floor is yours.
Good morning, I'm Domingo Martinez. I'm Deputy Head of Unit at Eurostat for Population and Migration Statistics, and it's a big pleasure being here this morning. As my colleague Sigita has explained, housing is a multidimensional issue which requires statistics and data coming from very different statistical domains. And in this presentation, I'm going to drive you through we are going to take a deep dive into housing data, and we have selected a number of indicators that we consider relevant for analyzing the housing phenomena. Starting with macroeconomic statistics, here we have, or Eurostat produces a very wide range of data that is useful for analyzing housing aspects. We have prices, we have rents, we have data coming from national accounts, including investment in housing, the gross added value of the construction sector, capital stocks of dwellings. We have selected this indicator, which is the standardized house price to income ratio, and it shows how it evolves as compared to the long-term average. We can see that the peak was reached in the year 2022. That means it's a phenomena that has been developing across the past years. It's not something only very recent, but that has been developing over some time. And it's also important that we consider that here this displays the average of the euro area, meaning that the situation would be different if we go into specific countries or even more in specific regions, because housing aspects impacts differently depending on the territory of the European Union we are analyzing. We thought it is also very interesting to relate to the investment that is being made in housing, and we can see there are big discrepancies, big disparities depending on the country that we are analyzing. We can see countries like Cyprus, Italy, Germany, France, Spain, where the investment as a percentage of the gross domestic product of the GDP is higher than the European average, higher than 5% of the GDP. And this compares to other countries, Slovenia, Greece, Latvia, Poland, where the investment is actually below 3% of the GDP. So again, as mentioned before, in this housing phenomena, there are big differences depending on the country that we are analyzing, and even more depending on the regional or the subnational level. Eurostat also produces a large set of data on social statistics, and taking the social dimension is very important when analyzing housing affordability aspects. And here we have data on living conditions. We have we can analyze demographical aspects. We have also labor force data for the construction sectors, skills of the population working, and this provides very rich information that is very important to consider for for housing statistics. We have selected some indicators that are relevant. For example, here we can see that the number of single adult households has increased substantially, as much as 17% in the past 10 years. And this gives a very important notion on the pressure that the demand for housing is experiencing or is increasing in the past years. There is a clearly growing demand, a clear need for more dwellings due to the aspect that the single households are increasing substantially. Very relevant as well is to understand that the persons experiencing renting difficulties is quite substantial. We can analyze that by age group and see that in young and middle-aged groups, these renting difficulties are higher, and that gives accounts for the social dimension of the housing issues. And this data available from the EU Silk, and it provides, as you can see, you can find very rich granularity at Eurostat's website. Age groups, whether the persons are at risk of poverty and social exclusions. There are many breakdowns that are very useful for in-depth analysis. To understand the housing modalities, it's important to know whether the persons lives in their owner-occupied housing or whether they are renting. And here in the map of the left, we can see that there are big geographical discrepancies. This data comes from the population and housing census, which provides very rich geographical granularity. For example, this map on the left shows NUTS2 level regions, which is very detailed subnational level. And we can observe, for example, that in Eastern countries, in Romania, in Bulgaria, the share of persons living in their own house is very high, typically higher than 85%. And this contrasts with other countries, Netherlands, Germany, with the share of persons renting is much higher. Also, in the map on the right, we can see even higher geographical granularity, and this displays a very important aspect for analyzing housing, which is how many dwellings are occupied or unoccupied. And we can observe that in many regions there is a very big share of unoccupied empty conventional dwellings. This also allows you to dig further because there is very rich data, very large granularity at geographical and at variable breakdown level. Building up on that, as my colleague Sigita has explained, Eurostat offers grid data, which consists in dividing the European Union in little squares of 1 kilometer each side, 1 square kilometer grids, and this allows to analyze very important demographic information. For example, in these two grid maps that we can see in the presentation, this relates to two big or middle-sized cities in the European Union, and the red points account for grids, population grids, where the majority of the population is in the older age groups. Gray means the balanced situation according the age groups. Blue would mean that persons working in working age are overrepresented in that grid, while the green grids means that the younger age groups under 15 years old are overrepresented. Here we can see an interesting phenomena that in big cities, big and medium cities, typically the city centers, the urban parts have prevalence of the older age groups, while in the outskirts, in the suburbs, we have prevalence of young age groups. And this gives a very detailed geographical analysis of housing aspects that are very useful. Eurostat also offers grid data for other dimensions, for example, for dwelling census, the population and housing census. makes also a census of the dwellings available at in the European Union, and this can be also observed in similar analysis here by grids. We have gone through macroeconomic statistics, social statistics, but it's also very important to consider the business statistics. And there Eurostat offers again structural data, short-term data, and including analysis on tourism statistics such as the short-term rentals or also the foreign direct investment. How many foreign persons or foreign companies are investing in real estate in the territory of the European Union. And going back to the short-term rentals, this graph shows how much since 2018 or between 2018 and 2024, the nights spent in short-term rentals has increased substantially, as much as 93% in that period, which is much higher, for example, than the nights spent in hotels. That in certain areas, this could create pressure on the accommodation for longer terms residential, making a shortage of dwellings available for longer terms in certain only in certain areas, of course. Very interesting, we have analyzed before when we were talking about the single adult households increasing substantially in the past 10 years. That creates a big pressure from the demand side, but it's also very important to consider the supply side. And this graph displays the building permits, which are an early indicator, an anticipated indicator for how many houses, how many dwellings are going to be built in the few next years. And very interesting, we can see that since 2021, building permits have or are dropping substantially. This also relates to the final block of statistics available on housing that relate to the energy and environmental part. We have seen on the one side that the supply side would need to react to an increase in demand, but also it's very important to consider environmental aspects for which Eurostat provides very rich data, analyzing or understanding what is the environmental impact of the construction sector, for example, and the same applies to energy. We have selected energy prices as a very interesting indicator because it's not only important to consider how much the cost and the rents of houses are increasing, but also the cost associated of living in a house. And for that, Eurostat makes available, again, very rich data on energy prices for households. Thank you very much. That's all from our side, and now we are looking forward to reply to your questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Domingo. In fact, thank you to both our speakers today. And now, I'd like to give Sagita and Domingo some homework by asking them to take part in our Q&A. Again, for anyone who joined this webinar late, if anything wasn't clear or you'd like to send a question to either of our two speakers, you can do so via slido.com with the code #3579246. And now, with that, let's bring the panel together and begin our Q&A. So, question 1. Is the list of indicators available in Eurostat's database final, or are there plans to expand them? And I think this question should go maybe to Domingo, please.
Thank you very much, Mark. No, the list is definitely not final. At Eurostat, we are always trying to improve and to use new data sources, to provide more data to users, to provide high quality and accurate and timely data to users. And definitely we are working to improve the existing list. There is a very large set of data available, as Sigita has just explained. There are over 200 indicators and from more than 14 domains, but we are constantly working to improve what it is available. And in addition to that, we have to consider that this can be overwhelming for too many users. So we are working also to streamline the contents, and we are working to produce a dashboard with the more striking indicators, with the more to show the more striking or some of the most relevant data available in a streamlined dashboard that will be available at the beginning of the year, in the first quarter of 2026. We are working on it to have it available.
That's great. Thank you. And for our next question we have is, are there any data available on energy performance of buildings? And I think for this one, I'll go and start with Sagita, please.
Thank you, Mark. Indeed, very relevant question. As we have in our statistics that energy consumption for the residential buildings takes up to 25% of total energy final consumption in the EU. However, at the moment, there is not all dwellings or not houses in the EU have the energy performance certificate, which doesn't allow us accordingly to collect the statistics. However, it's not that we don't have anything. In the EU SILC, it is European Statistics on Income and Living Conditions. In 2023, we had a module where we collected information on energy efficiency. And there we have information, and we also published in the database the data on the share of households and individuals which have improved energy efficiency in the last 5 years. And this information is available by different breakdowns as age, sex, income quintiles, disability, and more. Further, I would like to give floor to Domingo to complement my answer.
Thank you, Sigita. Yes, in addition to that, we have some good news even from today. So this morning, we have the official journal of the European Union has published a new regulation, and very important in statistics on the population and housing. And with this regulation, this provides the legal basis to collect such data. For example, on many other aspects, but for example, such data on energy performance classes. There is a directive of the Union that will apply from 2026 on energy performance of buildings, and this would allow countries to have member states to have more data available and to produce such statistics. So this new statistical regulation starts to apply from 2028, and from then member states and Eurostat we are working together to offer that very, very relevant information for users. There is a challenge though, and is that at this moment there is no energy performance class for all buildings. It's not all the buildings, it's not that all the buildings, all the dwellings in the Union have this analysis. It's at this moment that the data are not even available because we don't know the energy performance class of all buildings. So with this directive, such information would be progressively available, and then we will produce statistics for all users on that topic, because it's of course a critical element.
Indeed. And maybe take a short break, Domingo, but I'm actually going to immediately ask you another question. Does Eurostat currently collect or publish data on flat sharing, for example, shared housing or co-living? And if we don't, is there any plan to do so in the future?
That's a very challenging topic, Mark. So flat sharing, co-living, it's very difficult for statisticians to make data available on that. And I'm going to illustrate that with an example. Let's imagine a person who moves in to a big city. She has found a job there and rents an apartment and has the contract under her name. The apartment has two bedrooms, and she subrents the second bedroom to a friend, to a colleague, to a student. And this person moves into the flat as well. First, the second person would need to be registered as well, which unfortunately may not always be the case, but let's imagine it is registered, and that source is made available to statistical offices, confidentially, of course. And how would the statistical office, the statisticians know if these two persons are part of the same households, they are part of the same family nucleus, if they are a couple, if they are just two different households living? It is very challenging. That making such information available, I agree that it's very relevant and very important to know this phenomena. This would require definitely more efforts that we should work on, but also that the data sources that are available are more accurate in that sense, to be capable to produce accurate and high quality statistics, because it involves at that moment a decision for the statistician where not all the information is available. But we should also consider here the very rich and the very granular information that the population and housing census makes available to our users. In that cases, we have how many persons live in dwellings, how many persons per dwelling, how many square meters per person in each dwelling, how many rooms per person and per dwelling. There is quite a lot of information that supports this type of analysis as a complement on the question on co-living. Also, what facilities, energy available, toilets, facilities. So it's quite large data on households and dwellings that can be found in the from the population and census housing census, and this is available in our website and on the Census Hub, as Sigita has presented earlier in the first part of the webinar.
Excellent, thank you. And then our next question, taking into an account that affordability could be measured using macroeconomic and social indicators, what's the preferred source? And that's for Sigita, please.
Thank you, Mike. For this question, I would like to answer why to choose. Both are complementary data sources. While the macroeconomic indicators are showing the general trend at the national or regional level, the micro data or social statistics provide more information regarding subpopulation groups, as low-income groups, people with disabilities, by age breakdown. So this information is fully complementary and should be analyzed together when you want to see the total picture. Thank you, Mark.
Excellent, thank you. And our next question, what correlation have you observed between general inflation, such as high HICP, and rental price increases when comparing Southern versus Northern European member states? And is there a significant time lag in the price adjustments you are tracking? And that one's for Domingo, I think.
Yes, Mark, thank you. I can take that. Indeed, so housing affordability issues is a wide European Union point, even worldwide point. So there are issues in the south, in the north, in the east, in the west. I would rather say it is also very important to consider the urban and rural dimension, as we were pointing out earlier in the presentation. We have registered very important issues on housing affordability in big cities, in medium-sized cities, and that dimension we should take it into account. Also, when analyzing HICP data, as the user from the question was mentioning, inflation data that provides how the rents the rents are increasing, we need to consider a very important element, and it is that we have certainly new contracts being made for new apartments that are being rented, but the HICP, the inflation measure, should also consider the existing ones, which are more. There are more apartments currently being rented than the new contracts that are made. And the first ones, the current contracts, they are increasing the prices, the rental prices are increasing at a lower pace. So that makes that the HICP measure, it's not as high as one would expect, because we need to consider the both elements, the new contracts and also the existing contracts that can be linked, indexed to the HICP. There can be capped in so many countries. So this is very important information to consider in that point. Also, there were two questions. That was the first, I believe, with that we replied to the first, but it was also on the lack of when the information it is available. And here we have to highlight and to emphasize how timely the HICP is. For example, at the end of this month, at the end of December, the HICP for this December, Eurostat will be published it already for for the euro area. So this information is very timely, very accurate, so we can make this tracking that the user was asking for almost in real life terms. So it's at the end of the month, HICP flash estimate is already available for that same month, and then weather information 2 weeks earlier, the mid-month of the next month from the reference, it's also published. So it's very timely and very accurate inflation measure.
Lovely. And our next question. How does Eurostat gather and compile data for housing statistics, such as the house price index and house sales? And for this one, we're going to turn to Sigita, please.
Thank you, Mark. So generally, the data at national level are gathered by and collected by national statistical institutes. And after the Eurostat is validating data and calculating the aggregates and publishing the data. Also, for the case of house price index and house sales, the national statistical institutes at each country is collecting data. And for these two indexes, the most used data sources are administrative data, land registers or tax databases. In some particular cases, also some particular surveys could be coordinated by the National Statistical Institute to complement the data. And these surveys could be done with the companies or real estate agencies. Thank you.
I think you've partially answered the next question. So what data sources are used for these interesting statistics?
Yes, maybe I can continue, Mark. So I would just answer in general, because I'm not only focusing on the price statistics and house sales data. In general, when you would go and look on our webpage, there is a part which is called data sources, and you can investigate what different data sources are used to produce statistics. But in case of housing statistics, the sources are very rich. And I will not go to the domains, but I will just try. So, of course, there is a lot of use of administrative data. There is also census data use. There is information coming from the survey data and also from the private data sources. As Domingo already showed you, it is the statistics on the short-term rentals. It's partly coming from the private data sources. So actually, the statistics, as the society is evolving, and we are adapting and using more and different data sources to provide relevant and important information to the users. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So we've kind of looked at what Eurostat has right now, but let's look maybe a little bit to the future with our next question. So are there plans to use more administrative data and better harmonized administrative data in EU housing statistics? And I think now we'll hand over to Domingo for this one, please.
Yes, Mark, indeed, that's what we are aiming to do. I believe this relates also to a previous question when another user was asking whether the information, the list of indicators that we currently have available is final, or if we are going to expand it. And I can link very well the reply to this question with that one, because actually that is one of the main elements to develop new indicators, accessing administrative data sources to build up new data that is very relevant for the users. So we are at Eurostat constantly working on that front. We have we have also to take into account that statistics are very important, and users need every day more and more statistics, more accurate data, timely data that arrives early enough. And also, we don't want to disturb citizens and companies to produce this data. No, it's at the center. There is this dichotomy that there is a larger need of data available for users on the one hand, and on the other hand, citizens and businesses and companies, of course, for them, it is a burden, it is a problem if we are constantly asking them questions to collect more statistics. So what we are doing to resolve the first issue while not creating a second issue of more administrative burden is to take data from administrative sources. So this is very important, and it's actually the one of the main ways forward that we use to produce new statistics.
That's great, thank you. And also looking forward, and maybe going back on what you just said, is there any plan and or possibility to incorporate predictive analytics or algorithms or machine learning into housing monitoring frameworks, for example?
State-of-the-art technologies, I believe, is what the user is asking for. I said before, one of the main methods of the main tools to produce new statistics is to get access to administrative registers, to new data sources, and the other would be to be innovative. And for that, we need to use state-of-the-art technologies. So in Eurostat, we have innovation unit, we have IT unit, and within production units on the different statistical domains, we are always looking forward to incorporate new technologies, including machine learning, which can be useful for many domains. And this is definitely adopting new technologies, a way to produce higher quality statistics in the sense of more accurate. If we have access to big data and we can interpret that in a relevant manner, we can produce data that are more accurate, but also that are more timely. Because by adopting new technologies, we can produce data faster. When we publish data and it's too late, this is not anymore relevant for many users. It can be still used for structural analysis, but it is important to publish data as early as possible. And by adopting new techniques, new methods for producing statistics, we can be more accurate and more timely in the sense of faster publication, preserving that the data that we are publishing accurately represents the reality.
Very clear. Thank you, Domingo. And let's keep looking at if there's any future plans, but this time I'm going to ask Sagita, are there plans to create more detailed data on vulnerable groups? For example, young adults, low-income households, migrants, elderly living alone, please.
Thank you, Mark. I would like to start that this is a very important topic, and we are always streaming to provide more data on, in particular for the vulnerable population groups. And as a statistician who works in the social statistics, we indeed have the same in our mind. What I would like to, before going to say what more is available, I would like to invite the users actually to look what is already available. There is a lot of information produced by the social statistics and published in our Eurobase. So to answer, of course, we are always cooperating and looking what is needed, and we adjust our data collections to see how better to reflect the data information needs. So we have this in mind, and we will look into this and produce even more statistics reflecting more housing statistics reflecting the in particular vulnerable population groups. Thank you.
Thanks, Sagita. I think during this question is coming from Domingo's presentation. It's the question is what is behind the decrease in building permits in recent years? So maybe Domingo, you take this one, please.
That's of course striking indicator. It's very important indicator, the building permits, because it's an early indicator of how many houses are going to be built in the coming years. That there is a clear correlation on that. So that's why it's very important to take that on board. And in that sense, it is true that in the past years, building permits have been increasing at a lower pace as before. So that means that we can expect in the very short term less houses to be built across the territory of the European Union. Of course, that will be different depending on the country and depending on the local aspect. So this what we were showing in the slide in the presentation. It was data for the EU total, for the EU average. There are differences when we consider country, national, and local aspects.
Thanks, Domingo. And now a question on the housing cost over burden metric. So someone's asked, is Eurostat satisfied with the housing cost over burden metric? It seems misleading to compare countries where income taxes are high, but where government spending on behalf of households is also high, to countries with low tax and low spending. And that's for Sagita, please.
Thank you, Mark. I would like to say that there is no single indicator which you can use as the best indicator to measure the either affordability or the general situation of the housing for people. So housing cost over burden rate is one of the indicators which is also included in Social Scoreboard of Europe's Pillar of Social Rights, and it is monitored for the social policies. However, what I would like to answer to this question is that other indicators should be included in the context and analyzed together. So it's not single, it's not separated. So there should be other indicators in the monitoring framework, and one cannot be used for all purposes. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next question, how do you capture the levels of building vacancy and obsolescence across countries and cities? What trends are you noticing in residential and non-residential building vacancy? And that one's for Domingo.
We have that information on the unoccupied conventional dwellings from the population and housing census. So that data it's available. You can check it in our website, following according to what Sigita has presented before, and also. So we have this dedicated section on housing statistics in our website, and there you can find link to all the relevant databases. And most importantly, for this element, we have the Census Hub, which provides all the set of data collected from this population and census and housing census exercise, which you can make all the necessary tailor-made queries, including that for unoccupied conventional buildings. Now, I mentioned before that just today the official journal of the European Union has published the legal framework for the future population and housing statistics, and we will improve the frequency how this data is available on that basis. So Eurostat will provide data to capture that trends that the user is asking for in the coming years when this regulation is in force. So there is good news in that front, and that also shows what we were discussing before, that Eurostat is constantly working to produce to make available more data to the users.
Great, Domingo. And now I think a question that probably can't be answered in a minute or two, but I'll still ask it. So the challenges or limitations in collecting and analyzing housing statistics at the European level, what are they? Sagita, please.
Thank you, Mark. I think, yes, we can call it challenges, but we can call it also opportunities. We can always stream and aim to collect more granular data and data including more vulnerable population groups in more detail, also at the territorial level, which is very important because even at the country, at one national level, the housing situation could be very different in the city center or urban areas. So we can always aim to collect and provide better, more granular data for more subpopulation groups, and as well to increase timeliness that the policymakers and users get the most relevant information as soon as possible and as soon as it is available. Thank you.
Okay, and I think we just have time for one final question. So there's many different statistics and figures from housing data, and they serve many different purposes. So it's really impossible to choose one, but if you had to choose one general statistic or figure that you've learned from your work in housing statistics that you think would be useful for EU citizens to know, what would it be? And I think I'll ask Domingo then this last question, please.
That's a tricky question, Mark. I'd rather say housing is a very complex phenomena, and I would tend not to choose a single indicator. I don't think actually that can be done. I don't think it is possible to choose a single indicator of housing that can summarize. It's a very complex phenomena. which involves data from many different statistical domains, as we have seen, and using a single indicator for one single domain, I believe could be biased. Have seen also the importance of the geographical aspects here, rural, urban, local, regional, national, European level. So in that sense, I believe it's a complex matter which requires in-depth analysis from a large set of indicators.
Lovely. Thank you, Domingo, for that. And that's definitely all we have time for. Thank you again, Sagita and Domingo. And for any of our audience that couldn't get enough of Slido, there's also a short Slido survey for you to give feedback, which we'd love for you to participate in. And for any further questions, you can contact our multilingual user support team. The contact details will be posted on our Slido. Anyway, from all of us here in Eurostat in Luxembourg, we wish you all a great afternoon, and we hope you'll join us for more of our webinars in the new year. Thank you.